Chapter 333. Dozens of arrows whistled through the air, shooting towards Han Shuo like rain. However, before these arrows could even reach him, the deadly red light that had been brewing in Han Shuo's hand once again flew out. Another 30% of his magical yuan was infused into the demon's lair edge. Having absorbed 30% of the magical yuan, the demon's lair edge emitted endless howls of resentment. The fresh souls that the demon's lair edge had just absorbed still carried a trace of longing for life. They emitted an unreconciled resentment that soared to the heavens. However, the souls of the bandits that had been tightly bound by the demon's lair edge had no way of escaping the eternal imprisonment of the demon's lair edge. Their hatred and resentment actually increased the power of the bloody radiance of 10,000 slashes. A dazzling firework-like ball of light blossomed with beautiful purple and red. The demon's lair edge that had flown out of Han Shuo's hand once again danced in the air like a blazing sun full of barbs. All the arrows hadn't even gotten close to Han Shuo before they were pulverized by the demon's lair edge powered by the bloody radiance of 10,000 slashes. The demon's lair edge's power hadn't weakened in the slightest. It carried boundless resentment and killing intent as it streaked across the sky in a beautiful, dazzling arc, heading straight for Fass and the others. "Not good, leader, retreat." The bandit next to Fass was greatly shocked. He cried out in fear and turned around on his warhorse like a stray dog. Seeing his subordinate flee in a panic, Fass, who had originally planned on scolding him, suddenly recalled the cruel scene of the bloody light. He couldn't help but shiver. He didn't dare to pretend to be a hero and stayed behind. He reined in his warhorse and ran like the bandit. The dazzling bloody light swirled and descended like a murderous spirit, pulverizing everyone it came into contact with. First, 5 or 6 bandit chieftains were smashed to pieces. Under Han Shuo's control, the demon's lair edge howled and churned through the air with a soaring, killing intent. It chased after Fass and the others without losing any of its power. The corpses below Brettel City resurrected one after the other. Under the cover of the canopy of necromancy, these corpses blankly attacked all living beings in the surroundings. The sight of the corpses with their intestines still hanging out and their bodies dripping with blood-holding weapons obviously provoked the bandits who should have been charging towards Brettel City without a care for their own safety. In the face of fear, the most instinctive action for humans was to run as far away as possible. These bandits made full use of this advantage. Tuku's group of elites on warhorses ran away much faster than when they charged over. There were even some who'd rushed out like lightning before Han Shuo's acid swamp had even taken shape. Who knew where their potential came from? Of course, even more bandits were intercepted by the acid swamp. The swamp was suffused with the aura of death and the smell of corrosion. After a dozen or so bandits had carelessly walked into the acid swamp without a care for their own safety and were dissolved into a dozen skeletons, the remaining bandits who hadn't yet escaped suddenly became well-behaved. In front of them was the acid swamp that could instantly kill them. Behind them were the corpses that were closing in on them. The bandits, who were surrounded by danger on both sides, were bitterly weighing which side was safer out of extreme yearning for life. After a while, their desire for life overcame their fear of corpses. Unable to soar through the air like Han Shuo, they forcefully suppressed the fear in their hearts and gripped the weapons in their hands, aiming at the approaching corpses. These corpses that had died not too long ago might have been their best friends, but the bandits knew what to do under the threat of death. Kill! One of the bandits let out a low roar, and the remaining bandits no longer hesitated. They pointed their sharp weapons at their recently deceased comrades, killing them for the sake of their own lives. They cut off the heads of the corpses that had been whole, leaving their dead comrades without a complete corpse. The true battle strength of the resurrected corpses wasn't particularly ferocious. Usually, they didn't even have half of their strength when they were alive. They weren't even as agile as the zombie warriors summoned from another world. These corpses often brought fear in people's hearts. Once the bandits overcame the fear in their hearts and truly attacked these corpses, they discovered that their movements were slow and sluggish. Their strength was also affected. Although they didn't fear pain, as long as their heads and hearts were completely destroyed, the corpses wouldn't be able to stand up again. The bandits quickly discovered the weakness of the corpses. When they destroyed a few corpses and discovered that they weren't that scary, the fear in their hearts gradually subsided. They began to work together in an orderly manner to destroy the corpses that were still standing. Compared to the acid bog that sealed off their path of retreat, these corpses didn't seem as frightening. As long as they didn't think about the fact that these people were once their friends, the bandits would be able to quickly and efficiently eliminate the corpses that were still standing. The bandits, who were not kind to begin with, were obviously more cruel and unscrupulous. They comforted themselves by saying that the people in front of them were already dead, and without hesitation, they waved the sharp weapons in their hands and beheaded the corpses of their former comrades. Han Shuo stood proudly in the air, controlling the demon's lair edge in a practiced manner as it chased after Fass. He lowered his head to look at the bandits who were slowly getting used to it. He let out a soft "eh" and murmured, "I've underestimated their viciousness. No wonder they were once bandits. Ordinary soldiers wouldn't disregard the lives of their former comrades as much as they do." After muttering to himself in a low voice, Han Shuo thought for a moment. He grinned cruelly and said, "It looks like it's time to add another fierce dose." Just as Han Shuo was about to use the skeletal staff to summon the true undead army with his remaining mental strength, he suddenly heard an earth-shattering rumble. The entire Bretel city seemed to be trembling from this enormous rumble. The direction of the sound came from behind Han Shuo. Han Shuo was stunned for a moment before he exclaimed softly, "They've finally activated the magic crystal cannons." Taking a deep breath, Han Shuo was about to chant another long and tedious incantation when a group of white figures suddenly appeared in his line of sight. A group of 100 people was slowly approaching from the direction that Fass and the others had fled. Kas, who'd fought against Han Shuo last time, was walking over together with the temple knights of the Church of Light, as well as a few white priests. Han Shuo was startled. The demon's lair edge that had been chasing after Fass suddenly changed directions and shot towards Kas and the others. The demon's lair edge surged forward, radiating bloody light in all directions. Its target was Kas, who was surrounded by the temple knights. Kas, who possessed the Church of Light's divine weapon, Revelation, would be able to play an extremely important role in this situation. He could even reverse the situation. When the holy light of Revelation sprinkled down, not only would the corpses be completely purified, even if Han Shuo summoned the undead army, it would be of no use. In a large-scale battle like this, Bretel City's defenses were completely supported by Han Shuo's undead army. Once they lost this support, Bretel City would truly be doomed. Therefore, when he saw Kas appear in the distance, Han Shuo immediately hardened his heart and decided to eliminate this person at all costs. Otherwise, if he allowed Kas to open Revelation and chant the blessing of the holy light, it would be harder than ascending to the heavens for Han Shuo to win this battle. Under the activation of the bloody radiance of 10,000 slashes, the demon's lair edge spun at high speed, shooting bloody light that reaped lives. Its killing intent soared to the heavens as it smashed towards Kas. The few lower-ranked temple knights at the front hadn't even had the time to take out their weapons when they were smashed by the huge, hedgehog-like ball of light. The demon's lair edge, which was like millions of sharp weapons flying together, once again displayed its bloody, pulverizing power as soon as it landed among the lower-ranked temple knights. Crunching sounds rang out as the armor of the temple knights was shattered first, followed by the flesh beneath the armor. However, the armor of the temple knights was obviously many times stronger than that of the bandits. When the demon's lair edge had crushed the bandits' armor, there hadn't been the slightest sound, as if it was as easy as crushing their flesh. However, the armor of these temple knights of the Church of Light must have been forged with a special method by an alchemist, and even possessed a portion of magic resistance. When the demon's lair edge's bloody radiance of 10,000 slashes sliced down, although the temple knights had also turned into a rain of blood along with the bandits, it had taken Han Shuo 5 times the time. It was precisely because he had spent 5 times the time that the 6 high-ranked temple knights with crosses on their chests that they had the time to form a hexagonal star formation, quickly surrounding the still spinning demon's lair edge in the center. The 6 long swords that had been blessed and soaked in holy water simultaneously burst forth with a pure and holy light, shooting at the demon's lair edge that was still shooting out thousands of bloody lights. A wave of extremely pleasing tinkling sounds accompanied by flying sparks continuously rang out. The long swords soaked in holy water had a certain degree of purification effect. The portion of the vengeful spirits that the demon's lair edge had just absorbed that hadn't completely fused with was actually released into the world. The other energies of the holy light hindered the demon's lair edge's continued rotation. It looked like the sword formation formed by the 6 high-ranked temple knights did indeed have some miraculous effects. The demon's lair edge's rotation speed became slower and slower as its magical yuan was gradually depleted. Finally, under the control of Han Shua's consciousness, it once again flew out of the sword formation and into the sky. After the demon's lair edge flew into the sky, the 6 high-ranked temple knights with crosses on their chests were also panting a bit, looking at the demon's lair edge that had already disappeared with lingering fear. It was as if they were afraid that the demon's lair edge would return once again. Red Archbishop Kos looked at the changes in front of him with trepidation, repeatedly praying with the Book of Revelation in his hands. Only when he discovered that the demon's lair edge had truly disappeared did he look at Han Shua and say, "Heretic, your sins are no longer enough to be forgiven. The burning of the holy fire will be your only end." Kos, who had bitterly tried to persuade Han Shua last time, no longer had any patience with Han Shua now. In Kos's eyes, Han Shua was now a demon through and through, a sinner even more evil than the Calamity Church. He had to be eliminated at all costs in order to save more people from his evil. "I'm actually looking forward to the burning of your holy fire, but I'm afraid you won't have the chance." Han Shua snorted disdainfully. His right hand suddenly burst into raging flames, enveloping Han Shua's entire right hand. Han Shua looked at the raging flames burning on his right hand, then stared coldly at Kos and said, "Is the color of your holy fire like this? Heretic who blasphemes the holy fire, you will be judged by the God of Light." Kos shouted loudly and started chanting a hymn under the heavy protection of the 6 temple knights. The divine weapon of the Church of Light in his hand, Revelation, moved on its own amidst his melodious hymn, quickly flipping its pages. Circles of light carrying a holy aura spread into the surroundings, rapidly turning the corpses that Han Shua had resurrected into ashes under the illumination of the holy light. Even the dark green canopy of necromancy that enveloped the entire sky was torn apart by rays of dazzling golden light. Even the acid bogs were evaporated by the holy light. In almost an instant, the kingdom of death that Han Shua had expended an enormous amount of mental strength to construct actually shattered under the envelopment of the holy light. It wasn't wrong to say that the Church of Light was necromancer's natural enemy. Han Shua naturally wouldn't pay any attention to low-level light mages, but Kos, who possessed the divine weapon, Revelation, was indeed a great threat to Han Shua when he used the power of the divine weapon. Han Shua, who'd originally had victory in his grasp, had been disrupted by Kos's appearance. If he couldn't use his undead creatures to resist them, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for Han Shua to defend Bretel City by himself. "I hate this kind of light," Han Shua said in disgust as he looked at the spreading circles of holy light. However, his mind was rapidly thinking of a way to deal with it. This was because, due to Kos's appearance, Han Shua suddenly discovered that the bandit leader Fas, who'd originally fled without a care for anything, had actually returned with his subordinates. Under the purification of the holy light, the several hundred bandits below Bretel City had lost the double threat of the acid bogs and corpses. They once again started eyeing the sparse soldiers on the city walls. Chapter 334. As matters stood, he could only summon the Fire Elite Zombie, Wood Elite Zombie, Earth Elite Zombie, and Little Skull at the same time. Otherwise, if Han Shua wanted to resist the attacks of the bandits and the Church of Light's Kos's group by himself, he would have no chance of winning. Kos was heavily surrounded by the 6 Templar Knights, holding Revelation in his hands and still chanting hymns. Halos of holy light slowly drifted out from the Revelation, purifying the kingdom of death that Han Shua had painstakingly created. Han Shuo didn't continue to hover in the air to kill Kus. Instead, he slowly floated backwards. With a wave of his hand, Han Shuo threw out the blood seether. As soon as the blood seether flew out of Han Shuo's hand, it immediately emitted a thick bloody mist. This demonic treasure that Han Shuo had meticulously refined didn't contain any aura of death. Naturally, it wouldn't fear the purification of the holy light. The bloody mist of the blood seether spread out. The bandits that were enveloped by it all began to wail miserably. The blood seether could stimulate the blood in their bodies, causing it to rapidly flow through their bodies, causing them to explode one by one. When the blood rampaged through their bodies would explode when they couldn't bear the burden. Wherever the bloody mist passed, the bandits would beat their chests and stomp their feet, howling in pain. However, they couldn't stop the rapid flow of blood within their bodies. The crisp popping sounds indicated that their bones had been broken by the blood. Then, before they could react, the broken bones pierced through their soft skin, causing even more blood to gush out. One by one, the bandits enveloped in the bloody mist exploded and died. During this process, Han Shuo brandished the skeletal staff in his left hand and also had the time to summon the little skull, Earth Elite Zombie, Wood Elite Zombie, and Fire Elite Zombie. Under the cover of the bloody mist from the blood seether, the Earth Elite Zombie was the first to burrow into the ground, stealthily heading in Kas's direction. The little skeleton carried the Wood Elite Zombie and flew into the sky, landing directly on the city walls of Bretel City. Under Han Shuo's orders, the little skeleton and the Wood Elite Zombie were responsible for the safety of Bretel City. Once bandits rushed up the city walls, the little skeleton and the Wood Elite Zombie would be responsible for killing them. The Fire Lotus imprint on the big-headed Fire Elite Zombie's forehead became more and more obvious. As soon as he flashed out from the other dimension, pillars of fire shot out from his body. The Fire Lotus on his forehead was like a raging flame. As it rapidly throbbed, Fire Lotuses gradually grew larger and larger. The Fire Lotus was a treasure of the fire attribute. The Fire Elite Zombie gradually grasped how to use it after obtaining it. The lotus flames that floated out from the Fire Lotus were only the size of a fingernail at first. However, this was obviously not the true form of the Fire Lotus. The Fire Lotus swayed in the wind, the blazing flames gradually growing larger until each of them was the size of a large bowl. The Fire Elite Zombie's entire body was covered in raging flames. Lotus flames floated out from the mark on his forehead, gradually growing larger and larger until they were the size of large bowls. They flew towards the bandits in the surroundings, and any bandit that came into contact with a spark was instantly set ablaze. The fierceness and terror of this kind of flame exceeded their imaginations. Even if they quickly poured water from their water bags, they still couldn't extinguish the spark. A fingertip-sized spark would ignite anything it touched. Skin, clothes, even armor and weapons seemed to be able to fuel the ferocity of the flame. In the span of a few breaths, those bandits that came into contact with the spark all screamed miserably and became flaming men. Before they could cry out in pain from being burned, an unpleasant burnt smell wafted from their bodies. The flaming men turned black, the living turned into the dead. This process was so short. Under the extremely painful and bewitching flames, dozens of bandits near the Fire Elite Zombie turned into charcoal and collapsed. On the other side, the Earth Elite Zombie, who was deep underground, took advantage of the chaos above his head and slowly snuck into the ground by relying on his remarkable ability as a darling of the earth. He quickly ran towards Kas and the others. As a red-robed archbishop of the Church of Light, while Kas was extremely against heretics, he did indeed possess a bit of impartiality and compassion. He watched as bandits were burned into black chunks of flesh in front of him. Chanting a hymn, Kas shouted to the temple knights around him, "Save them!" Han Shuo continued to use the blood seether to reap lives while focusing his attention on Kas. Seeing the temple knights slowly approaching while protecting Kas, Han Shuo immediately gave the Earth Elite Zombie the order to launch a surprise attack. Violent tremors accompanied by muffled sounds came from the depths of the earth. Earth spikes abruptly rose from the ground, piercing towards the Church of Light who had their attention focused on the front. Caught off guard, the temple knights and white priests of the Church of Light were stabbed to death in an instant. The earth spikes pierced through the feet of those knights precisely. As a result, those well-armored knights fell off their warhorses while howling miserably. Translator, Abyssal editor, Alim, the earth spikes pierced through the souls of those knights precisely. As a result, those knights fell off their warhorses while howling miserably. The white priests who purified the souls on the battlefield were the targets of Han Shua's deep hatred. Their purification of the souls of the dead caused the Demon's Lair Edge to be unable to obtain enough soul energy. It could even be said that it indirectly prevented the Demon's Lair Edge from evolving further. Up until now, the Demon's Lair Edge had yet to truly possess a primary soul. The Demon's Lair Edge would only be able to evolve into a primary soul after absorbing enough soul energy. Only then would the Demon's Lair Edge truly become a peerless weapon in the truest sense. Coming to Bretel City this time, the continuous large-scale battles had allowed Han Shua to be like a fish in water. The soul energy of the dead was devoured by Han Shua's Demon's Lair Edge, rapidly accelerating the Demon's Lair Edge's growth. Han Shua even felt that the Demon's Lair Edge wasn't far from its final form. He couldn't allow it to be destroyed by these hateful priests of the Church of Light. Therefore, when Kas and the others approached, Han Shua gave the Earth Elite Zombie the order to kill the white-clothed priests first. The white priests who didn't need to fight in close combat naturally didn't wear armor. Under the attacks of the earth spikes, every one of the white priests, apart from Kas who was firmly protected by the temple knights, couldn't escape from Han Shua's murderous hands. Demon, we must eliminate this demon. Kas trembled as he tightly grasped Revelation in front of his chest. Seeing the white priests who didn't receive the same treatment as him being stabbed to death, he angrily yelled at Han Shua in the distance. You brought this upon yourselves. I've never provoked your Church of Light. It was you who chased me to death and refused to let go. From now on, I will kill any Church of Light disciple who dares to offend us. I don't believe I can't kill all of you. Han Shua arrogantly floated in the air, coldly yelling as he looked at the trembling Kas in the distance. Shoot him to death. Hatchets, pikes, javelins, hurry. The bandit leader, Fas, roared loudly with extreme heartache as he watched his subordinates drown in the sea of fire. The remaining two ballistae aimed at the fire elite zombie in the middle of the sea of fire. All kinds of sharp weapons flew towards the fire elite zombie in the middle of the sea of fire. The fire elite zombie wantonly controlled the lotus flames within the sea of fire, causing the lotus armor on his body to ring out. The various ballistae that flew towards his body had yet to truly land on his body when the sharp arrows and sharp blades were burned by the raging flames. When they finally landed on his body, not only was their power greatly reduced, but they also couldn't display their penetrative power after the metal melted. In addition, the fire elite zombie would naturally reconstruct his body after being formed, and the reconstructed body was sufficiently sturdy, so he didn't suffer much damage. However, even the 5 ultimate elite zombies that were nurtured in the 5 extreme places of heaven and earth didn't have limitless energy within their bodies. Just like how there was no absolute eternal power in everything. After 20 to 30 lotus flames floated on the fire elite zombie's forehead, the fire elite zombie finally showed signs of fatigue and sent a signal to Han Shua. Han Shua could clearly sense the fire elite zombie's thoughts. The fire elite zombie, who had yet to fully mature, had released such a large amount of energy all at once. Naturally, he would be somewhat exhausted. Sparks flew everywhere the 20 to 30 lotus flames passed. None of the bandits that came into contact with them were lucky enough to be burnt to death. In just a short period of time, more than 300 charred corpses were left on the ground forever. This was the result of the fire elite zombie not having fully grasped the power of the fire lotus. Once the fire elite zombie slowly matured and became more adept at controlling the fire lotus, the destructive power he would be able to cause would be even more terrifying. In addition, when the 5 ultimate elite zombies were first refined, each of them would naturally possess a set of cultivation methods. In other words, the 5 ultimate elite zombies that had just been born were actually in their weakest form. Once they slowly evolved using the cultivation method, their strength would slowly grow stronger with the passage of time. Their use of their innate abilities would also become more and more terrifying. Han Shuo had no doubt that when the 5 ultimate elite zombies evolved to the end, they would possess the mystical power to destroy heaven and earth. Not to mention that the 5 ultimate elite zombies could also form a large formation. Now that the water elite zombie was also in the process of being nurtured, along with the metal elite zombie that was the most difficult to appear, Han Shuo would be able to practice the large formation. Having used up all of his energy in one go, the fire elite zombie was already showing signs of fatigue. With a wave of Han Shuo's skeletal staff, the fire elite zombie disappeared into the other dimension amidst the raging flames. After the fire elite zombie left this plane of existence, the 20 to 30 lotus flames that had lost their source of energy gradually dispersed into the sky after claiming the lives of another 50 bandits. The bandits that had been dodging the lotus flames in all directions, wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves, all breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the deadly lotus flames disappear one after another. They silently cursed their leader in their hearts. What did he mean by there wasn't too much danger? Bretel City, which hadn't had any city defenses in the past, was simply an incomparably terrifying demon castle. All sorts of strange and bizarre things could be found here. By now, more than half of the 6,000 bandits that Fass, the leader of the Greenfire Bandits, had brought with him, had died. More than 3,200 people had mysteriously died in this siege, including more than 1,000 true elites. Fass wanted to cry as he looked at the corpses strewn all over the ground. Bretel City was like a demon city bearing its sinister fangs. It was like a tireless machine that harvested lives, constantly displaying its ruthlessness and cruelty. The elites that had managed to reach the top of Bretel City's city walls with great difficulty were all sent flying down from the high walls under the attacks of the other 2 strange undead creatures. Practically all of them were dead before they even hit the ground. This was the work of Little Skull and the Wood Elite Zombie. The bandit leader Fass had thought that the appearance of the Red Archbishop of the Church of Light, the natural enemy of necromancers, would allow them to easily break through Bretel City's defenses. However, when he saw Little Skull and the Wood Elite Zombie jumping about under the illumination of the holy light, easily killing his subordinates that had climbed up the city walls with great difficulty, he cursed Kasa's 18 generations of ancestors in his heart. What nightmare of a necromancer's natural enemy! What emissary of the continent of light! It's all King bullshit. The Red Archbishop with the divine weapon, Revelation, in his hand couldn't even purify a tiny skeleton and a few zombies. He's King done us in. Fass cursed incessantly in his heart as he watched the bandits explode one by one inside Han Shuo's blood seether. Then he looked at Kas and the others from the Church of Light, who were in a complete mess and couldn't even fend for themselves. Fass rapidly thought of a countermeasure. By now, Fass could see that Bretel City was relying solely on Han Shuo's support. If he were to retreat with his tail between his legs after losing so many of his brothers, the reputation of his Greenfire Bandit band would definitely plummet once word of this got out. But if they didn't leave now, who knew how many more unimaginable methods that terrifying city lord of Bretel City would have? In the depths of Fass's heart, he was truly afraid of Han Shuo. He secretly cursed the guy who'd leaked the information and instigated him to come over 100 times. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Bolts of crossbow bolts shot out from the ballistae. Tongues of flame shot out from the war chariots and landed on the temple knights of the Church of Light, instantly causing 3 temple knights to be blown away along with their warhorses. After resting for a long time, the exhausted soldiers on Bretel City's walls finally recovered their strength. They once again controlled the sharp weapons beside them to spit out dazzling tongues of flame. Motherf asterisk cur. Retreat. All of you, retreat. Fass no longer hesitated when he saw the flames from the war chariots soar into the sky. Although 1,000,000 gold coins was tempting, he might not be able to obtain it in the current situation. The war chariots moving again meant that the soldiers on the city walls had regained their fighting strength. Thinking back to the terrifying destructive power of the war chariots, ballistae, and catapults, then looking at his subordinates, Fass painfully gave the order to retreat. The bandits had long since been scared witless and had only been waiting for Fass' order. When they heard the heavenly order to retreat, the bandits no longer dared to stay. They followed behind Fass and fled into the distance. Useless Church of Light, what kind of emissaries of God of Light are you? You can't even purify a few dark creatures. I really feel ashamed for you, Tui. When Fass passed by Kos and the others, he stopped his warhorse and glared at Kos, who was in the middle of the temple knights, with a look of disdain and anger. He spat on the ground to vent his anger before leaving. In the beginning, Fass had been toyed with by Xianxia. When the people of the Church of Light had suddenly appeared and purified the corpses under the illumination of the holy light, Fass had thought that he had seen the dawn of victory. Who would have thought that the holy light wasn't purified enough? The few undead creatures that had reappeared had actually caused such great damage to them. Fass felt that he had been played by Kos again. One could imagine the sullen feeling in his heart. If Fass hadn't known of the Church of Light's influence on the continent, if he hadn't known that the Temple Knights were one of the trump cards of the Church of Light, the savage Fass would have mercilessly led his subordinates to tear these useless followers of the Church of Light to pieces. Shoot those people in white. Xianxia, who was floating in the air, put away the Bloodseeker, which had been reduced to a bloody cloth, and shouted at the soldiers on the city wall. The soldiers, who had recovered their strength, obeyed Xianxia's orders and aimed their war chariots and ballistae at the Church of Light. The remaining firepower violently fired at the Church of Light, causing the Temple Knights of the Church of Light to be thrown off their feet. Even Kos was almost hit by a goblin bomb. Cardinal, what do you think of the situation? A Temple Knight with the pattern of a cross on his chest was protecting Kos with all his might as he asked hesitantly. Red Archbishop Kos, who had just been insulted by the departing Fass, had an ugly expression on his face. He awkwardly dodged a goblin bomb, then closed his eyes and said in a low voice, "Another failure. It looks like I'll have to see the Pope myself. Let's go, leave this place immediately." As soon as Kos gave his order, the Temple Knight waved the sword in his hand and pointed behind him. The Temple Knights who had suddenly arrived this time dragged the 37 corpses onto their warhorses and gradually rode away from the smoky battlefield, not leaving behind any belongings of the dead. They're gone, they've all retreated. A soldier who had lost all his strength looked at the gradually disappearing enemies and revealed a somewhat ugly but sincere smile. The soldiers who could still stand looked at Xianxia, who stood proudly in the air like a demon god. They felt that as long as Xianxia was present, Bretel City would never be breached by anyone again. Xianxia had used the Yin demons to watch the departing enemies from afar. He knew that they had truly retreated. Looking at the corpses strewn all over the ground in front of Bretel City that was riddled with holes, Xianxia shouted, "Soldiers who still have strength, guard this place well. Don't relax for even a moment." These people were truly exhausted. Xianxia could still hear deafening explosions coming from the direction of the other two city gates. He understood that the battles on at least two sides hadn't ended yet. However, the soldiers on this most desperate of battlefields had long since lost the strength to rush to either side. Xianxia also understood that they had used every ounce of strength they had, so he decided to head there himself. The citizens of Bretel City were on tenterhooks when they heard the weak cheers from the soldiers on Xianxia's side. They were afraid that they would be implicated in the massacre of the city, so they paid close attention to any changes in that direction. There were even a few brave citizens who rushed to the top of the city walls and witnessed the entire battle. Therefore, as soon as the Temple Knights, Fass, and the others had retreated, the citizens in this area started cheering. The citizens, whose hearts had been filled with fear, were now filled with a strong sense of happiness and excitement. Being able to keep their lives from being implicated in the massacre of the city made them feel very happy. For so many years, the city lords of Bretel City had always been one step ahead of them. But after Xianxia's arrival, they had finally subverted their understanding. He'd practically single-handedly turned the tide, firmly defending the enormous Bretel City with his miraculous powers. Although victory had come with great difficulty and was full of twists and turns, the fruit of victory was incomparably sweet. They had always been struggling at death's door, but now they felt incomparable excitement at this moment of victory, because they were the witnesses of this moment. As the citizens on Han Shua's side cheered, the citizens on the other three sides also gradually revealed smiling faces. Apart from the soldiers at the city gate that Falk was guarding, there were even citizens who took the initiative to join in the fight against the enemy. These citizens, who didn't know how to use the defensive equipment, worked together to move huge stones and place them on the catapults. They watched as the stones they'd placed on the catapults fell into the bandit group and caused terrifying destruction. When the stones that Falk's side had originally prepared were used up, the citizens volunteered to move the stone tables and chairs from the nearest houses and use them as defensive stones to hurl them out, dealing an unforgettable blow to the invaders. The city gate that Dick, Chester, and Fabian were guarding was facing the flying dragon bandits. This city gate had 2 magic crystal cannons, 4 war chariots, 7 ballistae, 6 catapults, and 1,000 elite soldiers. Dick and the other 2 didn't have any experience in commanding an army, so Falk had arranged for an officer who was good at defending the city. It was precisely because they were worried that their side wouldn't be able to handle the heavy burden that Han Shua and the others had placed more firepower on this side. The leader of the Flying Dragon Bandits, Afai, was a sinister, scheming, and vicious villain. He'd had other thoughts from the start. When fast signals soared into the sky, Afai didn't immediately launch an attack on the city gate. Instead, he waited for a while until he saw the response signals from 3 different directions. Only then did Afai give the order. Afai was already a bit scared out of his wits from the response signals. He had his subordinates send out signals in 3 colors, blue and yellow. Yellow meant that this side's attack was very successful, blue meant that the attack was somewhat difficult, and red meant that this side's attack had met with a fatal blow. The response signals from the 3 sides, from Han Shua's and Falk's sides, were all red. This meant that the attack from the 2 sides had met with a fatal blow right from the start. Because they'd used the strategy of luring the enemy in, the composed Dorcas didn't start with a fierce firepower. Therefore, the Flying Dragon Bandits who were observing from that side had sent out a blue signal. The 2 red and 1 blue signals didn't look good at all. Afai wanted to preserve his strength, so he ordered some of his subordinates to attack the city gate that Dick and Chester were guarding. Chester and the others had never faced such a situation before. When they saw Afai's bandits charging over, they immediately gave the order to fiercely bombard them. Because Han Shua and the others were worried that they wouldn't be able to handle it, their firepower was actually the fiercest. When the 2 magic crystal cannons and war chariots spat out tongues of flame, and the ballistae and catapults revealed their terrifying destructive power, more than half of the several hundred bandits that Afai had sent out were instantly killed. The startled Afai immediately gave the order to observe. He was already a bit scared. After luring the enemy over, Dorcas's side suddenly erupted with firepower. The area that was extremely close to the city wall exploded with terrifying destructive power in an instant. Several hundred bandits who'd reached the city wall were instantly drowned in cannon fire. The bandit who'd originally sent out a blue signal shot out 2 red signals in a row when he saw the originally calm and collected cannons suddenly become so fierce. Afai was already a bit on edge. When he saw the originally blue signal turn into 2 red signals, he immediately gave the order to retreat another 100 meters, forbidding anyone from continuing to attack. When Fast retreated, Afai didn't send out a single soldier. He only sat on his warhorse and stared at Dick and the others on the city wall in the distance. It was as if he was preparing to overwhelm the other side in terms of momentum. He was waiting for the other bandit groups to attack Bretel City and take advantage of the situation. When that time came, he would make his move on those bastards on the city wall. When the news of Fast's failure was spread by Afai's subordinates, the alarmed Afai understood that he definitely wouldn't be able to obtain any benefits this time. Without another word, Afai made a prompt decision to immediately give the order to retreat. The group of bandits that had surged forth left behind 200 corpses and swiftly retreated into the distance. Chester and Fabian, who'd experienced this kind of scene for the first time, looked at Afai hatefully galloping away. They thought to themselves complacently, "It looks like our side is indeed powerful. Could it be that I've scared them out of their wits just by looking at them from afar?" Chapter 335. Han Shuo was most worried about the city gate that Chester and Dick were in charge of. When he rushed over, he discovered that the soldiers on the city walls were all safe and sound. The traces of battle in front of the city walls weren't intense, and the 200 or so bandits' corpses indicated that the bandits hadn't suffered many losses. "Are you all right?" Han Shuo descended like a rainbow and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the complacent Chester and the others. "My lord, we're fine. That cowardly bandit only charged once and then kept watching the city gate from afar. He suddenly retreated just now." Chester smiled easily and pointed in the direction that Afai had left in as he spoke to Han Shuo. Han Shuo nodded after taking a look from afar and said, "It's good that you're all right. Leave 300 of you to guard this city gate. The rest, go support Dorcas at the city gate." "All right, we'll set out immediately." Dick and Chester responded and began to instruct the soldiers who hadn't made a move much in high spirits, yelling for them to quickly descend the city walls and support the other two sides. Rumble, deafening explosions rang out from the other two city walls. Han Shuo flew directly towards the side that Falk was guarding. Dorcas was a military genius. He displayed extraordinary intelligence when he'd kidnapped the merchants last time, and he'd performed similarly well when he'd swept away the bandits afterwards. Han Shuo believed that there wouldn't be too much of a problem on his side. On the contrary, it was this night-born Falk. Although his strength was a bit higher, perhaps it was because of his knighthood that he'd been restricted by some dogma. His arrangements on the battlefield weren't flexible enough, and Han Shuo was worried that he'd suffer a loss. When Han Shuo arrived at the city walls that Falk was guarding, he saw the bandits' corpses strewn all over the ground. He then looked at the 100 or so soldiers on the city walls that had been pierced by arrows. He immediately understood that the battle here must have been very intense. Falk's side was facing the Tomahawk bandits. The towering leader of the Tomahawk bandits, Bynum, wasn't as adept at fighting as Fass, nor was he as adept at scheming as Afai. This simple-minded man had been blinded by 1,000,000 gold coins, and had thrown all of his subordinates into a violent assault. Falk was doing his utmost to resist the Tomahawk bandits' assault. The two sides had sunk into a cruel war of attrition. The barbarian Bynum, who had suffered heavy casualties, didn't seem to know how to retreat. He roared with all his might as he commanded his subordinates to attack the walls. More than 100 soldiers on Falk's side had died unknowingly, and 400 of them were either heavily injured or lightly injured. The remaining soldiers didn't have much strength left. If it wasn't for the citizens of Brettel City joining the defense against the bandits at the critical moment, Falk's side would have been in grave danger. By the time Han Shuo arrived, the battle had already reached its climax. More than a dozen tyrannical bandits had already rushed up the city walls, engaging in battle with the soldiers on top. The soldiers, who were almost out of strength, unleashed their last bit of strength to stab, hack, and slash. Some of the citizens, facing the threat of the bandits, actually joined the fray without fear of death. They raised their spears and continued to stab the bandits who had climbed up the walls. Han Shuo landed on top of the city walls like a bolt of lightning, setting off a whirlwind of death. He let out a soul-stirring howl as he charged into the middle of the dozen bandits by himself. His two hands were like sharp, indestructible weapons, piercing through a bandit's body with a single thrust. It didn't take long for all of the bandits to be killed on the spot with their chests and stomachs cut open. With the death of these bandits who'd madly attacked the soldiers, there was no longer any way to stop the skeletal staff-wielding archmage necromancer, Han Shuo. A terrifying undead army gradually filled the area below the city walls, accompanied by a long and drawn-out chant. The evil knights brandished their huge bone spears, and several bandits would be turned into a bloody mess by the sharp bone spears that were shrouded in death energy. Groups of gargoyles whistled past like crows, sending the bandits on their warhorses flying into the air. Before they could even fall to the ground, the gargoyles had already torn them into pieces. This time, the acid swamp covered the group of bandits, and the terrible screams never stopped. Groups of bandits were corroded by the acid swamp into new white skeletons. Han Shuo's appearance had completely reversed the situation. Every time the demonic Han Shuo waved his skeletal staff, there would be surging waves of magical elements. Hordes of undead would appear, or acid swamps with astonishing destructive power would appear. From time to time, a few corpse explosions would explode, causing the Tomahawk Bandits to suffer more and more casualties. Seeing that Han Shua's appearance had turned the battlefield upside down, the leader of the Tomahawk Bandits, Bynum, roared in anger. He overestimated his own abilities and actually urged his warhorse to charge at Han Shua. Before they'd even reached Han Shua, his skeletal staff shook slightly and a circle of strong magical ripples spread out. Rows of javelin-like bone spears pierced through the air, so dense that it was like a sudden rainstorm. Without any luck, Bynum and the warhorse he was riding were all pierced by the bone spears. Everything that wasn't protected by armor was pierced through. 2 of the bone spears directly pierced through Bynum's eye sockets. He didn't even have time to let out a cry before he died. The leader is dead. Han Shua's arrival caused a huge panic among the bandits. The terrified bandits suddenly screamed when they discovered Bynum's tragic death. It was like a reason and an excuse to escape. None of the surviving Tomahawk Bandits dared to stay, and they fled the area without a care for anything else. One of the more daring and meticulous bandits pretended to lift Bynum's corpse, but secretly took off Bynum's space ring. Han Shua, who'd always liked to profit from the dead, discovered the bandits' tracks with a glance. He laughed lightly and floated down from the top of the city wall like a ghost. He soundlessly approached the bandit who was madly sprinting in ecstasy and said, "Sometimes, the wealth of the dead can make it difficult to protect one's own life." The bandit who'd taken off Bynum's space ring thought that his comrade was greedy for his loot when he heard the sound coming from behind him. He turned around with an ominous glint in his eyes and swung his axe down. With a flick of Han Shua's right index finger, the axe flew out with a clang. The bandit suddenly felt an unparalleled force surge into his arm, and he couldn't help but stagger backwards. He'd already turned around and clearly saw who the person behind him was. The bandit didn't dare to show off anymore and scrambled away. Unfortunately, the bandit had no chance of escaping in front of Han Shua, who was flying over like a ghost. Han Shua easily pierced through the bandit's body from behind. He took out Bynum's space ring and flew back to Fok's side with a smile on his face. "Another extra income," Han Shua said to the panting Fok with a smile. Since Han Shua had appeared here, Fok understood that the crisis on his side had already been resolved. Fok understood that Han Shua's strength was astonishing. He knew that the battle here would be over the moment Han Shua appeared. Reality proved that Fok's judgment was indeed correct. The bandits didn't dare linger after Bynum's death, especially with the terrifying destructive power of the undead army. Therefore, all the bandits fled from the city wall like a tide after leaving behind over 1,000 corpses. The rumbling of the magic crystal cannons on the other side of the city gate also gradually faded away. Han Shua understood that Dorcas's side should be coming to an end now that he couldn't hear the cannons anymore. This was the first time Brettel City had faced such a huge test, but they'd finally withstood it with everyone's combined efforts. After witnessing Han Shua's terrifying strength, all of the citizens who'd participated in the battle looked at Han Shua with reverence. When the last bandit disappeared into the distance, their reverence gradually turned into trust. Thunderous cheers suddenly spread throughout the entire city wall. Today, all the citizens who participated in the battle will receive a reward of 5 gold coins. Fok, you're in charge of distributing them. Han Shua smiled as he looked at the citizens who'd survived the calamity and instructed Fok. As soon as these words left Han Shua's mouth, the cheering citizens erupted into even more intense shouts of excitement. Each and every one of them looked at Han Shua with even more fervent gazes. They couldn't help but feel that the city lord was so mighty at this moment. "Don't worry, my lord. I will definitely not treat these citizens who've helped us unfairly." Fok respectfully agreed. He looked at the corpses of the bandits outside the city, thinking that the armor and weapons these bandits had left behind should be worth a lot of gold coins. In addition, the bandits would definitely have some gold coins in their pockets, right? The bandits really have left. You're in charge of cleaning up the battlefield. I'll go take a look at the situation on Dorcas's side. After Han Shuo gave his instructions, he turned into a streak of light that streaked across the sky, flying towards the city gate that Dorcas was guarding. The sounds of the cannons gradually died down. Han Shuo looked into the distance and saw the billowing smoke of gunpowder, as well as the figures of the bandits gradually fading into the distance. The ground was littered with corpses, and the ground was riddled with holes. The situation was just as tragic as the previous two battles. Dorcas, who was guarding the city gate, didn't disappoint Han Shuo. When he arrived at Dorcas's side, Han Shuo discovered that Dorcas was counting the number of dead and wounded soldiers. With a glance, Han Shuo discovered that there were dozens of corpses neatly arranged in one area. Dorcas led the remaining soldiers to stand in front of the dead soldiers, solemnly saluting them after counting their numbers. Han Shuo walked to Dorcas's side, not saying anything. The bodies of the young soldiers who had died in front of him all had quite a few crossbow bolts stuck in them. Some had been stabbed to death by flying short axes, while others didn't even have their limbs intact. They must have experienced a period of unbearable pain before they died. A heavy and oppressive atmosphere emanated from the solemn salute of Dorcas and the others. Han Shuo also performed the same military salute as Dorcas to show respect to the dead. After a while, Dorcas opened his mouth. There will always be casualties in war. This is something that no one can change. All I can do is reduce the number of casualties on my side, and do my best to make the enemy suffer as much as possible. Nodding his head, Han Shuo agreed. That's right. Sometimes, being cruel to the enemy is being kind to yourself. I think our soldiers' equipment needs to be improved. Sturdier armor and weapons will increase the chances of survival for our soldiers. My lord, how are the other three sides? Dorcas took a deep breath and finally shifted his gaze away from the dead soldiers. He looked at Han Shuo and asked, "Apart from Dick and the other three sides are about the same as yours. However, we've managed to hold them all." Han Shuo revealed a gratified smile as he answered Dorcas. Nodding his head, Dorcas let out a sigh of relief and said, "That's good." Tap tap. It was only at this time that Dick, Chester, and the others finally rushed over. When they discovered that Han Shuo was already standing there, they understood that the battle was probably over. Before they knew it, it was already dusk. A large patch of fiery clouds of sunset bloomed with the final radiance of the day. Under the illumination of the fiery clouds of sunset, the billowing smoke of battle seemed to be smeared with a layer of blood, adding a touch of poignant beauty to the hellish battlefield on earth. Flocks of crows flew over with strange cries. Smelling the scent of corpses, they pounced on the corpses of the bandits on the ground, tearing and devouring the delicious flesh to their heart's content as they let out disgusting cries. More and more crows gathered in the dusk of sunset, their mournful cries seeming to tell of the unbearable sight of the scene. "It's over, it's finally over." Han Shuo muttered to himself, casually giving a few instructions before returning to the city lord's mansion. For 3 days in a row, smoke billowed outside Bretel City. Some of the residents who lived close to the city gates could smell the pungent smell of burning corpses. A total of 15,000 bandits had attacked, but in the end, they'd left behind 8,000 corpses as well as 400,000 gold coins worth of armor and weapons, as well as 200,000 gold coins scattered around. In addition, the leader of the Battle Axe gang had 300,000 gold coins in his space ring. The 4 bandit groups that had come with greed for gold coins not only didn't obtain a single gold coin from Bretel City, but had instead delivered a lot of gold coins to Bretel City as Han Shuo had said. In this battle, more than 327 Bretel City soldiers had died, and 769 were gravely injured. The remaining survivors had more or less suffered some injuries. The magic crystal or of the 6 magic crystal cannons had been completely used up. The goblin explosives and tens of thousands of crossbow bolts that the merchants had transported over this time had all been used up. Not a single drop of kerosene was left, and the giant stones used for the catapults had long since been used up. The bandits that had rushed up during the siege had recklessly destroyed 2 war chariots, 4 ballistae, and a cumbersome catapult. Because the magic crystal cannons were made of specially refined magic metal, And the bandits knew that the magic crystal cannons were priceless. The 6 magic crystal cannons had been destroyed without a hitch. After this battle, Han Shua had finally received the respect of all the citizens of Bretel City. The enthusiasm of the young citizens to join the army was unprecedentedly high. Han Shua's godlike might spread throughout the entire city. In just 3 days, the citizens that had originally been full of doubts about Han Shua had already turned Han Shua into a god. To the youths, Han Shua had become a legend that they could never hope to reach. The slightly good-looking girls and beautiful women had all put on a thin layer of powder for the past 3 days. They found an excuse to linger near the city lord's mansion's gate, their coquettish eyes darting everywhere. No one knew what they were thinking. Bretel City soldiers, who had previously been the most despised by the citizens, had also become hotcakes that no one dared to approach. Some citizens excitedly introduced their beautiful daughters to the soldiers in shining armor. Bretel City had undergone earth-shaking changes overnight. At the city gate leading to Seamus City, Han Shua, Jack Chester, and a group of people were having a friendly conversation with a group of merchants led by Fabian. These merchants who had dared to come to Bretel City were all true merchants who dared to take risks for the sake of making a fortune. After experiencing this battle to defend Bretel City, they had a new understanding of the city. The siege equipment that the merchants had escorted this time had been used up at an alarming rate. The 7 Grand Duchies, the greater threat, still existed. When the corpses outside the city had been cleaned up and the roads had been slightly decorated, Han Shua immediately impatiently spent a large sum of money to purchase even more supplies. In addition to the endless supply of war equipment, there was also more food and daily necessities. As long as there was money, the merchants would never stop. When the heavy deposits were handed over to them, the merchants were also anxious to leave the city to handle matters, full of trust towards Bretel City and Han Shua. Fabian also had a letter that Han Shua had given him. The letter contained some special materials that Han Shua needed, including a few ambiguous, gentle, and sweet words for Phoebe. "Jack, you've really decided to stay?" Fabian looked at this distant nephew of his and asked again. Little fatty Jack nodded, replying with unexpected firmness, "Yes, I think this city needs me even more. Not to mention that Brian has also handed the position of financial officer to me. Old Fabian, don't worry, I'll take good care of Jack. Since this kid is so insistent, let him stay and try." Han Shua said to Fabian with a smile. 2 days ago, when Han Shua had found Jack, he'd still been hiding in his room, vomiting incessantly. After watching the entire battle from start to finish, Jack's appetite for meat had greatly diminished, and he'd often vomited for a few days in a row. At that time, Han Shua had thought that Jack would leave after experiencing this tragic battle. He hadn't thought that this fellow would actually have such astonishing willpower, insisting on staying here. From Fabian, Han Shua knew that Jack was very talented in gold coin management and financial affairs. Under the guidance of several experienced gentlemen at the Boost Merchant Guild, Jack had displayed financial management skills that even moved Phoebe. Aside from the fact that Jack and Han Shua were light majors, Phoebe had taken such good care of Jack because of Jack's and Han Shua's light majors, but also because of Jack's performance in this area. After learning of this situation, Han Shua didn't continue to persuade Jack when he saw that Jack insisted on staying in Bretel City. Instead, he directly gave Jack the position of financial officer in front of Falk, Dorcas, and the others, along with the gold coins he'd obtained from Troda last time, including Halentina's 400,000 gold coins, as well as all the gold coins he'd obtained this time, were all handed over to Jack, allowing him to manage this enormous amount of wealth. If it had been anyone else, Han Shua wouldn't have dared to hand over such a large amount of gold coins. Only Jack, who'd grown up with him at the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, was someone that Han Shua could truly be at ease with. Han Shua was the true master of Bretel City. Han Shua didn't need anyone's approval to make any of the personnel transfers in the surrounding areas. Falk, Dorcas, and the others didn't have any right to interfere or question him. With such a large amount of wealth in his hands, Jack had sunk into great excitement and panic for a very long time. It wasn't until Han Shuo comforted him for a long time that he gradually adapted to the role of financial officer. Fabian's words to Han Shuo were indeed correct. With such a large amount of wealth in Jack's hands, he'd gone from his initial panic to adapting to the role. He actually started to methodically and clearly divide the uses of the gold coins, recording each transaction in detail. This caused Han Shuo to have a whole new level of respect for Jack. Falk and the others hadn't trusted Jack in the beginning, but when they received their pay from Jack and heard him clearly list the value of each piece of armor and weapon, they were already a bit surprised. When Jack took the initiative to contact a few merchants and helped Falk, Dorcas, and the others purchase some war equipment that were in short supply at a much lower price than Falk and Dorcas had expected, the two gradually relaxed. In just a short 3 days, the busy Jack displayed the intelligence that a qualified financial officer should have. The young Jack was also gradually accepted by Falk and the others. They thought that having such a young financial officer might not be such a bad thing after all. All right then, take care of yourselves. Fabian looked at the two young faces in front of him. It was as if he could see Bretel City being filled with vitality in their hands, dazzling from the chaotic stage of the east. With Han Shuo and the others seeing them off, the merchants were escorted back to Seamus City by the guards led by Chester, gradually disappearing from Han Shuo's line of sight. Han Shuo knew that Bretel City would definitely be even more prosperous the next time they came. Chapter 336. Bretel City had a beautiful day. The 4 city gates had been cleaned up. Apart from the potholes in front of the city gates that couldn't be restored to its original state, the terrifying scene from a few days ago couldn't be seen anywhere else. Under the warm sunlight, the 5 mountain chiefs around Bretel City brought some of their brothers to Bretel City. The earth-shaking rumbles from a few days ago had spread for dozens of miles. The mountain chiefs could imagine the ferocity of the battle just by looking at the marks in front of the city gates. Thanks to the information Dick, who was also a mountain man, had conveyed to them what had happened a few days ago. They were all in awe of the new young city lord of Bretel City. Fulkin of Mount Tali had long since witnessed Han Shuo's strength. He'd expressed goodwill to Han Shuo before the battle had even started. Otherwise, Falk wouldn't have been able to transport the siege equipment so easily back then. The other 4 mountain chiefs were also well behaved. Under Dick's guidance, they arrived at the city lord's mansion. Along the way, the new appearance of Bretel City had left a deep impression on them. The imposing magic crystal cannons, war chariots, and other equipment seemed a bit more ferocious after experiencing the smoke of the battlefield. The soldiers that greeted them along the way were still the soldiers of Bretel City. However, the aura of these soldiers made them feel a bit unfamiliar. After surviving the cruelty of the battlefield, these soldiers were no longer cowardly. Their shining armor shone brilliantly, and their expressions were calm and reserved. There was a faint murderous aura emanating from them. Are these still the same Bretel City guards who wore tattered armor and ran faster than the citizens? The leaders couldn't help but feel puzzled, as if they were getting to know these soldiers all over again. When they arrived at the city lord's mansion, the mountain chiefs saw some smiling citizens taking the initiative to clean up the surrounding streets. There were also some beautiful women and girls shyly gathered in front of the city lord's mansion, laughing and discussing something in low voices. For a moment, the mountain chiefs felt that every part of Bretel City was different. His lordship is not someone to be trifled with. Don't speak carelessly, Zack. It's not fun to offend him. Dick was familiar with the mountain leaders and knew that Zack was the most boorish and careless, so he kept reminding him along the way. Dick, you're talking more and more nonsense now. I remember you used to be very quiet. Why are you so long-winded now? Zack was a short and sturdy man. He didn't know if it was because of mining ores all year round, but his skin was as blackwood stone. Cousin Dick, is this city lord really as powerful as you say? You're not deliberately exaggerating, are you? The female leader of the mountain people was called Delia. She inherited her father's position and became the leader of Mount Silk. Delia had the typical high-nose bridge of the mountain people and 2 very slender and straight beautiful legs. She was a round one. 73 meters tall, and was much taller than the average woman. Delia's appearance was just as moving as her figure. Her wheat-colored skin was full of a healthy luster, and her wild eyes carried the unique curiosity of a young girl of her age. Her curvaceous body was wrapped in simple leather armor that covered her chest and abdomen, but her arms and calves were exposed. There was also a valuable dagger stabbed into her left knee, making her look quite tasteful. Beside her, Zack and the younger leader of the mountain people, Kent, both revealed a somewhat lustful and soulful expression when Delia spoke. It seemed that they were very interested in this Delia. In Bretel City, where there weren't many beautiful women, Delia had become the focus of many men. However, Delia herself was a senior swordsman, and she also held the mining rights of Mount Silk. Not everyone had the qualifications to hunt her. Delia had the straightforward personality of a mountain woman. She was like a thorny rose, becoming the focus of men in this place. Delia liked to use her proud assets to tease men who expressed strong desires for her. However, she had never shown any face to any man, and no man had ever been able to take advantage of her. Dick, who was a distant relative of Delia, smiled wryly and warned his distant cousin, "You better know your place. Don't play your tricks in front of the city lord. He's not someone you can handle. He's just a young man. What's so great about him?" Delia pouted and lightly snorted. She became even more interested in Han Shuo after hearing Dick's words. Sorry, hurry up and go in. Don't let the city lord wait for too long." The oldest leader of the mountain people, Armand, suddenly opened his mouth and lightly shouted. Among the 5 mountain chiefs, Armand had the most prestige among them. He was of the same generation as Delia, Zack, and Kent's grandfather. The 5 mountain chiefs often joined forces to resist the bandits' attacks, and would often communicate with each other. When they gathered together, Armand would often act as their elder and guide them on some matters. After Armand spoke, the group didn't say anything else. Only Dick told them some things about Han Shuo in a low voice, especially about Han Shuo's personality. Dick emphasized that Han Shuo had personally killed a soldier who dared to refute him as soon as he'd arrived in Bretel City. Before coming here, the mountain chiefs had already understood from Dick's information that the new city lord wasn't someone to be trifled with. When Dick carefully described Han Shuo's ruthless style, the group felt even more apprehensive. Delia was even more curious about Han Shuo. "It's best not to provoke this person. I don't care what you do, our Mount Tali will definitely build a good relationship with him. We won't try to make things difficult for him." Having personally experienced Han Shuo's annihilation of Troda, Fulkin had long since made plans to get along well with Han Shuo. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to go down the mountain to rescue Falk and express goodwill to Han Shuo. Among the 5 mountain chiefs, Fulkin had been the most arrogant and unruly. He'd rarely submitted to anyone for so many years. Now that he'd expressed his attitude without even going to see Han Shuo, the others immediately felt a bit more reverence in their hearts. After a while, Dick led the 5 mountain chiefs through the wide stone steps and finally arrived at the banquet location in the city lord's mansion. The servants he'd recruited last time to cook had all been left behind by Han Shuo in the city lord's mansion. Dorcas, Falk, Chester, Jack, and the others had already arrived in advance, waiting for the arrival of the 5 mountain chiefs. "Let me introduce my 5 compatriots to everyone. They are the chiefs of the 5 mines around Bretel City." Dick pointed at the 5 mountain chiefs as soon as he arrived, introducing them to Dorcas and the others. By the time Dick finished introducing both sides, Fulkin, who'd helped Falk fend off the bandits last time, was already laughing heartily as he welcomed Falk. He gave Falk a very heroic hug and said loudly, "Brave brother Falk, I've heard of your miraculous performance even on Mount Tali." As a regular knight, Falk smiled courteously at Fulkin, saying in a friendly and enthusiastic manner, "You praise me too much. Welcome. Where's your city lord?" Zack looked left and right, waiting for Dick to introduce him to the miraculous young city lord. However, he discovered that Dick didn't do as he'd hoped. He couldn't help but ask. The indifferent Dorcas shot a glance at Zack, his voice a bit gloomy as he said in a low voice, "Your city lord? You mean that you don't belong to the city lord's jurisdiction?" Although he didn't have great strength, Dorcas' aura after experiencing countless battles couldn't be underestimated. His low shout was as cold as the edge of a treasured sword. "Zack, shut up." Ever since Dorcas had been brought back by Han Shuo, he'd displayed his abilities in several battles and had become the object of the soldiers' trust. His deterrence in the army had gradually surpassed Fox. Dick deeply understood that this person's loyalty to Han Shuo was somewhat unreasonable. He hastily reprimanded Zack for speaking out of turn. For so many years, the mountain chiefs around Bretel City had never truly placed the city lords in their eyes. Naturally, they wouldn't show any respect in their normal conversations. Zack was used to this and didn't correct his words, immediately angering Dorcas. Dorcas, who was nearly 1.9 meters tall, stood there like an unsheathed sword. No one could ignore his presence. Unfortunately, his resolute face carried an indifference that pushed people 1,000 miles away, making him not easy to approach. "I'm sorry. Due to the incompetence and cowardice of some of the city lords in the past, we didn't show enough respect in private." Zack hasn't changed his words either. "I don't think he has any intention of offending the city lord. I hope you don't mind?" The old Adelman hastily came out to smooth things over. He secretly pulled on the rash Zack and winked at him. Dick and Fulkin also winked at Zack at the same time, hinting for him to quickly express his attitude in order to avoid provoking Dorcas' displeasure. The rash Zack wasn't a stupid person. The gazes of the three all landed on him. Zack, who'd originally been a bit indignant, finally lowered his head and said in a soft voice, "I'm sorry." Dorcas flicked a glance at Zack and snorted coldly. He didn't say anything else as he picked up his wineglass and went to find Jack to ask for more war equipment. He didn't continue to pursue Zack's rudeness. "Falk, where's the city lord?" Dick secretly breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the most difficult person to get along with, Dorcas, had left. Only then did he ask Falk, who was happily chatting with Fulkin. "Oh, the city lord said that it's rare for guests to come over. He said that he would personally prepare some sumptuous delicacies for them. He told us to wait here for a while." Falk chuckled as he explained. His eyes glanced at Delia a few times as he spoke, not concealing his interest in her at all. "Another lecherous, stinky man." The corner of Delia's mouth hooked up in a somewhat proud arc. She flicked a glance at Falk and then turned her head away, inwardly making this judgment of Falk. Delia's gaze left Falk's body, and turned to look at the cold and aloof Dorcas with interest. She seemed to find this cold and emotionless Dorcas to be more interesting. It seemed that Delia cared more about men who didn't care about her. The talkative knight Captain Falk, the humorous Chester, and the 5 mountain chiefs accompanied by Dick didn't display any unfriendly words or actions. They sipped on the fine wine in their glasses as they indirectly probed for information regarding the new city lord through Falk and Chester's mouths. Among them, the younger Dick and Kent were extremely curious about the rumor that Han Shuo had captured the Helen Duchy's Grand Duchess Helentina alive. Chester and Dick, these two filthy fellows, didn't care about Han Shuo's heroic image. They laughed in low voices as they recounted their presumptions to Dick and Kent. Delia, who wasn't far from the 4 of them, had always been very curious. The 4 filthy fellows laughed so lewdly that she, accidentally, overheard something she shouldn't have. She couldn't help but blush and spit in a low voice, cursing, "I really didn't think that the city lord would be so licentious. Humph, it looks like he's even more lecherous and disgusting than all the men in Bretel City. Haha, the city lord really has some skills." These filthy men didn't seem to think that forcing themselves on a woman famous for her viciousness was a despicable and shameful thing. It was as if it was a glorious thing. The 2 young mountain chiefs had faces full of admiration as they listened to Chester and Dick's narration. This kind of admiration was even stronger than when they heard how many bandits Han Shuo had killed. This caused Delia, who was eavesdropping on the side, to despise Dick, Kent, and the other 3. She cursed in her heart that there wasn't a single good thing in men. "My apologies everyone, I'm a step late. Bretel City's food ingredients are too scarce. Although I'm a bit late this time, I'll let them eat some rare delicacies." Suddenly, loud and clear laughter rang out from the inner room. The handsome Han Shuo slowly walked out with a smile on his face. Chapter 337. Han Shuo, who was over 1 meter 90 centimeters tall, naturally gave off an intimidating aura as he walked out from the inner room. Even in front of the mountain people who were generally taller, Han Shuo still stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. The demonic aura that he'd gained after practicing demonic magic was even more eye-catching. Han Shuo walked over with a smile and took out plates of oily yellow meat from his space ring, placing them on the table in front of everyone. Everyone, these are some rare meats that I've hunted down from a bit further away. Why don't you all have a taste? Han Shuo smiled and invited everyone to have a taste after laying out the large plates of meat. On the other side, Jack, who had been pestered by Dorcas to discuss military resources, could no longer control his yearning for delicacies when he smelled the fragrance of meat. Jack shook off Dorcas, who had been pestering him endlessly, and ran over. Dorcas was an ambitious battle maniac. His only interest was to build up the strength of the forces in his hands as much as possible, so that they would have even more explosive destructive power in future battles. Because of this, Dorcas had been extremely interested in little fatty Jack, who was now in charge of the finances. He'd used all sorts of methods to try and obtain more equipment from Jack. Jack's initial fear of Dorcas had slowly become more and more relaxed, and he didn't give Dorcas everything he wanted as quickly as Dorcas had hoped. "Yueh." Han Shuo smiled and shook his head when he saw Jack quickly run over. He then said to the 5 mountain chiefs with a relaxed expression, "Don't just stand there, hurry up and get to work. These aren't things that you can eat on a normal day." The 5 mountain chiefs, including Fulkin, all felt a bit fearful when they saw that Han Shuo wasn't as aloof as they'd imagined. They became even more reserved. Jack was the most familiar with Han Shuo, and Han Shuo had been Jack's only friend for so many years. He wouldn't be as polite as the others, and picked up a large piece of fragrant meat with his fork. He put it into his mouth and started chewing, exclaiming in surprise as he chewed, "Oh, not bad. What meat is this to be so fragrant?" "This is the front foot of a manticore. It tastes good, doesn't it?" Han Shuo replied with a smile and pointed at the other dishes, introducing them one by one. "This is the tail of a deepwater venom python. It's the chewiest, and that one has the brain of a harpy. You'll only know the taste after you taste it. This is..." The 5 mountain chiefs, Falk, Dorcas, and the others were all dumbfounded by Han Shuo's introductions. They'd never imagined that the delicacies in front of them would all come from high-level magical beasts. A high-level magical beast of this level could only be hunted by a team of experienced adventurers. Otherwise, an ordinary person would only be able to die. There are no such magical beasts in the vicinity of Bretel City. Where did he go to hunt them? Oh, these high-level magical beasts are not something that ordinary people can hunt. The city lord is indeed an inconceivable monster. Apart from Han Shuo, everyone present had the same feeling in their hearts. They all looked at Han Shuo with strange gazes. "What? This is the front foot of the manticore." Jack jumped in fright. There was still a large piece of meat on the knife and fork in his hand. He had heard that a manticore could often tear a person into pieces with a single swipe of its claw. Thinking of the delicious piece of meat in his mouth, he couldn't help but scream. "Not bad. How does it taste?" Han Shuo laughed and stared at Jack. "The taste is amazing, but when I think of the manticore using its front claws to tear people apart, why do I feel a little scared?" Jack had a lingering fear as he looked at the delicious food with his small eyes. He wanted to eat but couldn't overcome the pressure in his heart. Glancing at the others, Han Shuo found that they all had strange expressions on their faces. He laughed involuntarily and said, "What's wrong? Don't tell me you don't dare to eat it? Hee, this is something that I have specially hunted for all of you. You won't be so disrespectful, right?" Under Han Shuo's attentive gaze, Dorcas didn't say a word as he walked to the harpy's plate of meat. He picked up a large piece of black meat with his knife and fork, swallowing it in big mouthfuls with a gloomy face. "What's the big deal?" Contrary to Han Shuo's expectations, Delia pouted and snorted softly. She picked up her knife and fork and started eating the deepwater venom python. She picked up a piece of meat with brittle bones and started chewing it carefully. Delia's brows relaxed after only a small bite. She excitedly waved her knife and fork again, trying to get a bigger piece to taste. She praised, "It's really delicious." Heh, the deepwater venom python is highly toxic. I don't know if I've cleaned it properly. If I haven't cleaned it properly, then I'll be in big trouble. Han Shua's lips twitched as he looked at Delia's alluring appearance as she chewed. Delia, who had been feasting without regard for her image, happened to hear Han Shua's mutterings with her little ears. Her originally excited movements suddenly froze and her tender red cheeks turned a bit pale. She looked at Han Shua and said in a trembling voice, "What did you say?" "Nothing, ha, with the deepwater venom python's highly toxic nature. If I hadn't cleaned it properly, you'd probably be dead by now." Han Shua laughed loudly and responded easily. "Damn it, you actually scared me." Delia glared fiercely at Han Shua, but didn't pursue Han Shua's threat. She focused more of her attention on the plate of deepwater venom python. This was because the other 4 mountain chiefs, as well as Falk, Dick, Chester, and the others, had already reacted and started to move. Little Fatty Jack even picked up his plate and began to dig in. They rarely even laid eyes on these rare foods, not to mention savoring them on their plates. Although Han Shua had brought quite a bit of food, there were even more people here. The mountain people's appetites in particular were famed for being enormous. Delia was deeply afraid that the others would split the food on their plates while she spoke, so she immediately ignored Han Shua and joined in the fight for food. It didn't take long for the 6 plates of food to be devoured cleanly by the group. They still held their knives and forks in their hands, but they still felt a bit unsatisfied. On one hand, the taste of the food was truly wonderful, and on the other hand, the ingredients were so rare that they gave people an even greater sense of wonder. Therefore, they quickly finished all 6 plates of food. When the servants that Han Shua had hired from the city lord's mansion delivered the food that they'd meticulously prepared, the group instead felt that it was dull and tasteless. They no longer cared for such ordinary food. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, the group followed Han Shua to the meeting hall. The servants would naturally clean up the mess. Han Shua, who'd always been smiling and talking wittily, wasn't as difficult to get along with as the 5 mountain chiefs had imagined. When everyone sat down, everyone was a bit less reserved and a bit more friendly and cordial. The rare food played a significant role in this. Han Shua sat in the very center, smiling as he glanced at the 5 mountain chiefs. Seeing that the 5 of them had restrained their smiles and sat up straight, he nodded and said, "Everyone, don't be nervous. I've invited everyone here this time to discuss some matters of making a fortune together. You are all citizens of Brettel City. Perhaps it was because the previous city lord wasn't able to earn your trust that you gradually drifted apart from Brettel City. This time, His Majesty has bestowed Brettel City to me. I will not let the 7 Grand Duchies and all kinds of bandits loot again. Not only will Brettel City not suffer, but your 5 mines will also be protected. From now on, I hope that everyone can truly work together and develop Brettel City together. Your Lordship, I believe that you can bring peace to Brettel City. As the chief of Mount Tali, I am willing to listen to your Lordship's commands. I know that your Lordship will not mistreat us." Fulkin had made up his mind when he'd arrived. He understood that just Han Shua's strength alone was enough to deal a heavy blow to Mount Tali. After seeing Brettel City's tight defenses along the way, Fulkin's resolve had become even firmer. Han Shua was also well aware of Fulkin's friendliness. He smiled and nodded to Fulkin, saying, "Many thanks, Fulkin. When Falk faced the threat of bandits last time, your Mount Tali even helped us. This city lord knows this. Your lordship is too polite. In the past, it was because the previous city lord didn't even care about his own citizens that I felt deeply disdainful. Your lordship is completely different from them. As a citizen of Brettel City, this is what I should do. Moreover, your lordship has also helped Mount Tali last time. Troda will never invade our Mount Tali again." Fulkin was very tactful. Since he'd already decided to cooperate well with Han Shua, he spared no effort in doing so. The other 4 mountain chiefs couldn't help but look at each other after hearing Fulkin's declaration. In their hearts, this new city lord was outstanding in all aspects. The only thing that worried them was that Han Shuo would take their minds for himself. This was the reason why they didn't dare to easily agree. Their minds were their main source of income and the foundation of their survival. According to Han Shuo, everything around Bretel City belonged to the city lord. Didn't that mean that their minds also belonged to Han Shuo? Han Shuo looked at the 4 mountain chiefs with a smile and chuckled, "I wonder if the 4 of you are willing to support me?" The 4 were startled when they heard these words. The other 3 young mountain chiefs didn't say anything, all focusing their gazes on the oldest, Ardman. Ardman was silent for a while, then braced himself and respectfully said to Han Shuo, "Your lordship, we are all your citizens. Of course we are willing to help Bretel City develop, but we don't know how we can help your lordship. Please enlighten us." Han Shuo smiled and nodded, saying, "Since you've acknowledged yourselves as citizens of my Bretel City, this matter will be easy to handle. To be honest, Bretel City doesn't lack anything other than a lack of manpower. Merchants will continue to transport a steady stream of goods. My Bretel City currently has enough gold coins to support the operation of Bretel City, but the issue of population cannot be solved in a short period of time. I know that there are currently 30 to 40,000 mountain people living in your mines. Apart from miners, there are even more elderly, women, and children. The living conditions in the 5 mines aren't ideal. They had all left Bretel City to live in the mines due to the incompetence of the previous city lord. Originally, they had no choice but to do so because they couldn't guarantee the safety of Bretel City. But now, I think Bretel City is already very safe. If the 5 of you don't mind, please let them leave the mountains. There are many empty houses in Bretel City. They should live in a better environment. What do you think?" Ardman was greatly moved by Han Shuo's words. He also understood that the lives of his tribe living in the mountains weren't easy. Apart from all kinds of ores in the 5 mines, there were very few trees. The wild beasts had long since been hunted to fill their stomachs. Water was also transported from the foot of the mountain. The miners on the mountain had to work day after day in exchange for some food transported by merchants. In order to guard against robbers, the mountain people all lived in the mines that never saw the sun all year round. If it wasn't to ensure that their lives weren't threatened, who would be willing to live on the mountain like savages? Now, the first thing that Han Shuo thought of was the pitiful people on the mountain. This moved the elderly Ardman greatly. He immediately kowtowed towards Han Shuo, tears flowing uncontrollably from his eyes. He choked with sobs. "I first thank the city lord for his kind intentions on behalf of all the people on the mountain. I won't say any unnecessary words. As long as your lordship can ensure that they don't have to worry about food and clothing, and give them a stable living environment, I will absolutely not object even if your lordship wants us to hand over the mines. Old man, please rise. They are all my people. Giving them a good living environment is what I should do. The 5 mines are the foundation of your survival and will be under your control in the future. It's just that although the city has abundant siege equipment, we don't have enough manpower to operate them. Once the regular armies of the 7 duchies come to attack the city, I'm afraid that with just our 3,000 city guards, even with so many siege equipment, we still won't be able to handle it. The only thing I ask of you is that when we face a common enemy, you can join forces with us to resist together. We will provide you with enough siege weapons. If we have enough manpower on the city walls, with Bretel City's defensive power, even the 7 Grand Duchies can forget about breaking through. I wonder if everyone is willing to work hard with me and fight for the safety of all the people of Bretel City?" There was no longer any gap between them at this point. Old Ardman had worked hard all his life to constantly resist the robberies of the various duchies and bandit organizations, bringing a better living environment for the people of the mountain. His ideals and Han Shuo's way of doing things didn't conflict at all. Therefore, when Han Shuo made the suggestion, Ardman no longer hesitated. He immediately shouted at the other 3 young mountain chiefs, "You 3 kids, hurry and thank the city lord's grace with me." Hearing this, the 3 youths no longer had any doubts. Even Fulkin, who'd already expressed his trust in Han Shuo, immediately knelt down on one knee towards Han Shuo. Each of them solemnly swore to Han Shuo that they would risk their lives to defend Bretel City. After helping the mountain chiefs up one by one, Han Shuo said with a smile, "When I went to Mount Tali last time, I discovered that Fulkin and the others' weapons and equipment weren't good enough. This time, the bandits left behind tens of thousands of weapons and armor. Placing them in Bretel City's warehouse will only take up space. There's no harm in equipping them for you all." The 5 mountain people had painstakingly mined ore for so many years. All the ore they'd obtained had been exchanged with merchants for food and other daily necessities to maintain the basic lives of the elderly, women, and children on the mountain. They didn't have any extra gold coins to buy more weapons and armor. Some of them only used some crudely refined iron rods. When the 5 mountain chiefs heard Han Shuo's words, they thought of the shining armor on the 3,000 city guards along the way, as well as the sharp weapons gleaming with a cold light. When they compared the shabby appearance of their own subordinates, they all felt their faces flush with embarrassment. "Many thanks, my lord, many thanks, my lord." Fulkin was the first to react. He immediately kowtowed again, crying out in excitement. Seeing Fulkin's kowtow, the other 4 mountain chiefs also kowtowed with heartfelt admiration. Each of them was filled with excitement and love. Their gazes towards Han Shuo became more and more convinced. "Hee, everyone, get up. This is just the beginning. I believe that as time passes, Bretel City will blossom with even more beautiful prospects." Han Shuo once again let the 5 mountain chiefs get up, chuckling as he spoke. "Boo-hoo, hundreds of thousands of gold coins are gone just like that." Only the financial officer, Jack, cried out in pain. However, his low cry didn't cause any waves amidst the joyous cheers of the crowd. Welcome to Legends of Cultivation, audiobooks, where we bring ancient fantasy to life through storytelling. Follow the rise of heroes who defy fate, unlock mystical powers, and battle across celestial realms. Our audiobooks are crafted for fans of Chinese cultivation novels, filled with battles, breakthroughs, and legendary artifacts. Subscribe and be part of an unforgettable journey into the realm of immortality.